The Sky Titans were an ancient race, much taller and far more intelligent than the giants of today. The Sky Titans had hewn vast fortresses into the mountains themselves, blunt, megalithic citadels that overlooked the shimmering seas of clouds, pierced by the great islands of rock on which stood other castles. Hermetic by nature, the Sky Titans had long ago forgotten about the other races of the world, for they were content in their reclusive realm, hidden from others by the sheer, inaccessible nature of the peaks and their shrouding cover of cloud. The Sky Titans rarely descended below the tree line, save to tend their herds of cave beasts and enormous mammoths. The Sky Titans lived alone in their fortress-like peaks, too solitary to ever unite under a single banner. The further into the mountain range, not only did the mountains tower ever taller, but the Sky Titans also grew larger and larger. The most ancient of that long-lived race grew to enormous sizes, yet over the great ages of their lives, the Sky Titans became sedentary, until finally becoming like the mountains themselves. Many ogres believed that the final peaks they climbed in the ancient giant lands were not mountains at all, but instead the eldest of the Sky Titans, now permanently enthroned in living stone. Nearly 3,000 years before the coronation of Sigmar, hundreds of miles away from the ancient giant lands, the coming of the Great Maw triggered the big migration of the ogres, sending thousands of confused and starving ogres up into the mountains in an attempt to escape the lethal attentions of their new god. Their arrival heralded violence of an unprecedented scale in the mountaintops. The ogres came as a plague of locusts to the Sky Titans, for they ate everything they could find, stripping the mountains of all food and slaughtering the mammoth herds with abandon. Noting the growing losses amongst their herds, the Sky Titans were soon made aware of this ugly new threat that had climbed the mountains to assail them. Although alarmed, the Sky Titans were far from helpless, and they unleashed lightning storms and avalanches, slaying many ogres and driving others off the mountainside to fall to their doom. Thus began what the ogres call the War in the Sky, pitting the last surviving ogre tribes against the Sky Titans. Always the attackers, the ogres, surrounded and besieged each peak, while the Sky Titans defended their castles with enormous cannons decorated with friezes, their largest and most loyal herd beasts, and finally their vast bodies, stomping down upon the ogres, or snatching them up and hurling them at great distances, so that they plummeted through the clouds and fell many miles to their deaths. It was in this time that a tyrant, known as Bruto Thundergut, became legendary for smashing his way into the sky castles with his huge, two-handed obsidian club called Siegebreaker. Although their population had been drastically reduced, the ogres still outnumbered the Sky Titans by hundreds to one, and what's more, the ogres attacked together in tribes, whilst the Sky Titans lived alone in their fortress-like peaks, too solitary to ever unite under a single banner. The war was a bitter one, but with every victory, the ogres grew stronger, and every battle provided an absolute glut of flesh. One by one, the isolated mountaintop keeps fell, and bloody feasts took place in their colossal halls. The more fortunate victims were already dead when the eating began, but by no means were all so lucky. As the ogres rampaged further into the mountain range, they noticed that not only did the mountains tower ever taller, but the Sky Titans also did. And this is where the belief began that the final peaks they climbed were ancient giants enthroned in living stone. If this belief was so, they were the last of their kind, for by -2735 IC, The ogres could find no more giants, and they reckoned that they had devoured the entire race, down to the last finger bone. Not content with destroying their foes utterly, the ogres slaughtered their herds of beasts and rampaged across the peaks, toppling castles into the valleys below. Today, only a few shattered stone shells and a wide scattering of immense ruins on the valley floors give any evidence to the once proud race of gentle giants, and the amazing heights that they had reached with their architectural marvels. The famous trade route known as the Ivory Road joins one of these passes, winding around the enormous chunks of masonry that were once the foundation stones of a city of castles in the sky. The deserted city of megaliths is amongst the safest areas the Ivory Road passes through, as the ancient giant holds are haunted by little more than shadows and movements seen out of the corner of one's eye. For a while, you see, the ogres were content to stay put, sprawling out atop the shattered halls of the Sky Titans, and dining on the dwindling and now shepherdless creatures. Yet there, on the very roof of the world, the ogres began feeling the ill effects of living at such great heights. Great clouds of debris from the explosive coming of the Great Maw continued to be carried up upon the wind from the east, and it fell heavily onto those highest peaks. At night, the skies shimmered with an unnatural aurora, and instinctively the ogres knew that they must press onwards. And so, the majority of the ogre tribes descended from the colossal mountains of the ancient giant lands, heading further westwards into the range known as the Mountains of Morn. Some foolhardy ones stayed, choosing to live high up above the clouds despite the premonitions many felt, although ogres have proven particularly stubborn to the mutating effects of chaos. They are by no means immune. And over the centuries, the ogres that stayed to eke out a living amongst the dust-tainted sky castles regressed in nature until they became feral and bestial. They evolved white shaggy fur with long talons, and a new affinity for the harsh cold in which they lived. Thus was the mountaintop race of Yetis born, and though rare, the abominable creatures have spread into many other high places of the world, where they prey on all who dare to visit these frosty realms. At the end of the War in the Sky, there was a rumor that the final few Sky Titans unfettered their mountaintops and sailed away on the clouds. But if this were true, none could say to where the refugees fled, or if they ever arrived there safely. Around -2000 IC, a lone Sky Titan was found roaming the Ogre kingdoms, and was hunted down and slain in battle by Bullock Knifefinger, whose tribe feasted on the remains for a month. Descendants of the long-forgotten Sky Titans, the current giants are large lumbering brutes that bestride the world seeking battle and food, the one leading to the other in a giant's mind. Giants can now be found almost everywhere, though they are thankfully rare. Giants often settle for a time before moving on, leaving behind ravaged countryside and flattened villages. They live solitary lives, but some of the hulking behemoths are coaxed or convinced to join the other race's armies. Rival green-skinned tribes will often fight over a giant, with the big lummox winning every time, as he eats the casualties from both sides. Nowadays, an ogre that has led a giant hunt and successfully brought in and broken a slave giant is hailed as a great warrior. A giant breaker is invariably extremely wrong and supremely confident of his own abilities.